Don't we live in an amazing country? It just blows me away. I was on the lake edge this morning. I'd been talking to Joe and Nick about the TEDxWanaka Trust, so I went on down there to see what they're up to, and there's a bunch of volunteers unloading trees out of the back of their ute, and I gave them a quick hand to get the trees up the hill in a wheelbarrow, and then I had to bolt to this thing. And it just amazes me. New Zealand's really run on volunteers, and particularly in all aspects of our society, and conservation's my passion. It's a big part of obviously Wanaka. I've got a team this morning running around the hills of a little place called Motu. You might have heard of the famous Motu Challenge race. Well, it's in the same area, and they're tracking kiwi that we've put radio transmitters onto. So yeah, we're really lucky to have these amazing volunteers and running around doing our conservation work with us. We have an incredible ecological history in New Zealand with our levels of endemic species, you know, the kakapo, the huia, saddleback, but we also have an incredible human history. We've got a really unique Māori, Polynesian history of navigation, and then of course Cook's arrival on the 9th of October in 1769. So we've got an amazing combination of unique events that happened only here in New Zealand. And one of the projects that I'm involved with in the region of Gisborne, also called Tairawhiti, it was called that for 800 years before Kapani Cookie arrived, and one of the projects we're working on is what we call the bioregions concept, and that idea is about restoring local passion, local iwi, hapu, kiwis basically, back into restoring our indigenous forests, our waterways and our species. Not being dictated to or managed by bureaucracy in Wellington, because that changes every few years, as we know, but getting local people managing their resources and their assets. But for a starter, I'd like to take you back about 800 years, pre-Polynesian Māori arrival in New Zealand. We had an absolutely unique ecosystem. If you could just picture yourself at night in a forest in New Zealand, it was incredibly dense. There's a written letter from a friend of mine, Paul Martinson, who's a well-known artist. He has a written account from a lady from the Wairarapa who wrote in the 1800s that you needed a tili lantern to see at midday in the New Zealand forest. It was that dense. The possums weren't there, the deer, the pigs, the ship rats. So we had this incredible forest that was full of a range of species like the moa. We had 9 species of moa, ranging in size from a turkey right through to 3.5 metres in height, weighing 230 kilos. They had a voice box, so they were obviously very vocal, and they were very common right from the alpine areas around Wanaka right through to the coast. And so common, in fact, that Quinn Berenson talks about in his book, how the gold miners of Otago actually burnt moa bones on their fires rather than wood because the bones were more abundant. So that must have been incredible having those huge moa running around calling and vocalising to each other. We've of course got the kiwi, as we all know, we're all Kiwis. We've got 6 species of kiwi left in New Zealand, and in the North Island we had another relation of the little spotted kiwi, but that's now gone. But back in the 1800s, it was estimated there were a pair of kiwi for every 4 acres of bush, so it turns into millions of kiwis. We've now got about 30,000 brown kiwi, and one pair needs 50 hectares to survive, so big changes there. We had amazing invertebrates, the largest cricket in the world, the giant weta, the Sherman tank, effectively, of the invertebrate world. They only live for 3 years and they're vegetarians, which is a shame. I think they're beautiful. This beautiful invertebrate that lives for 3 years and then dies. Never mind. Giant snails was the other one we had, carnivorous and cannibalistic snails. A friend of mine actually fed 2 giant snails a worm once, and they both started on each end of the worm, and they met in the middle, and the big snail kept going and ate the little snail. So not only carnivorous, but cannibals as well. And of course, they fed the tuatara, okay? So this was common all over New Zealand, even in central Otago in the snow. Okay, one of the only reptiles that can handle snow and glaciation and ice ages. And a very important species where I'm from, Tairawhiti, Gisborne, A lot of the carvings on the front of the marae depict the rangatira or the chief holding a pet tuatara, so they were held in very high regard. And of course, one of the most common species in our New Zealand forest, under our potocarp, tōtara, rimu, kahikatea forest, was this guy. And if you don't know what this is one of the seabird family, so it's one of 85 species of seabird we have in New Zealand. And this is a petrel. So we had petrels, prions, shearwaters, all coming onto mainland New Zealand every night in their millions, in fact probably in their billions, carrying fertiliser, so nitrates and phosphates from the squid and the lanternfish they'd been eating at sea. So effectively, miniature fertilising aircraft flying onto mainland New Zealand, fertilising our tōtara and rimu forest, and also carrying all that guano, there's another word for it, but I stick to guano, it's a bit more PC, carrying that guano underground, and so really fertilising stuff. There was a bird called the mottled petrel, which was common all over New Zealand. There's now 70 burrows left in Lake Hauroko on Petrel Island, so huge changes have happened. Of course, Māori arrived 800 years ago. They brought the kiwi rat, or the Polynesian rat, and then we lost 35 species between Māori arrival and European arrival. And then on the 9th of October, the morning of 9th of October 1769, Captain Cook arrived off the east coast of Gisborne, Turanganui Akiwa, and the Rongawhakaata people who live on the plains of Gisborne, they saw the sails of the Endeavour and they thought it was the giant mythical white bird that they'd heard about in their legends. In fact, it was Captain Cook. So he arrived at a place called Kaiti Beach, and very shortly after that, of course, we had whalers and the sealers, and Chatham's was discovered when the ship was blown off course, the HMS Chatham, and we brought with us lots of other real good stuff, like Norway rats and nice big feral cats who like to eat baby kiwis and weka and that sort of thing. So we basically turned New Zealand from this place that had evolved for 70 million years into an alien landscape. It was kind of like being on Mars, really. But we're learning how to fix it. A good friend of mine, Dr. John McLennan, who's an ecologist in Hawke's Bay, he said to me, mate, we're at the end of a 250-year mistake and we're starting to learn how to fix it. And we are. As Kiwis, we've developed some really novel approaches to conservation management, and we're actually now exporting those techniques and that technology overseas to the US and other countries which we would think are way ahead of us, but in fact we lead the world. Actually, I said to the Americans with their bureaucracy one day, I said, you guys are lucky you got to the moon when we did, because I'm sure a Kiwi would have got there probably a couple of days later, because there's probably some guy in the back of Wanaka in a shed with a welder and a bit of number 8, and he was just about there. But one of the projects we run is the grey-faced petrel, and this was a project I was told by the experts that it wouldn't work. So I never went to university, so I never studied things that told me it's been tried, no use trying it, it won't work, it's impossible. So I just go and do stuff with my amazing team at Ecoworks, and particularly Patsy here, she's amazing. But we set up sound systems on the end of Young Nick's Head, and this petrel here had been extinct for 84 years. So I said, well, let's just play calls and see if they come back. And sure enough, within 6 months, we had petrels back on Young Nick's Head, and we've now got a huge colony breeding, and so back to where it was back in 1930. So we did it again with gannets. This has been tried all around the world. It never worked, but I didn't read about that. I thought, oh, let's give it a crack. And so we got some fiberglass decoys made in America and shipped them out, and we flew them up there and we built nests, and then a month later we had 45 gannets, and this year we fledged 123 chicks. So and the decoys are so good, they actually mate with the real birds, mate with the decoys. So and we've also brought back other seabirds like these guys. This is a fluttering shearwater, which is now extinct on the North Island. This is the mutton bird that you buy down at the dairy in the barrels. That now nests in the North Island. I don't know why, but it turned up where we do this project. And the prion as well. One of the most amazing projects I've been involved with is the reintroduction of tuatara back to the east coast, to Tairawhiti, and working with iwi, Ngāi Tamanui and Ngāti Koata, which is the lead iwi at the top of the South Island in Marlborough. And just to be working with the sense of history, this 800-year history, and the iwi, and bringing the tuatara back was like bringing a long-lost cousin back to our region. And to see people's eyes light up, they almost go the size of dinner plates when we start reintroducing these species. And the opportunity that Ngāi Tamanui and other iwi, and actually locals, it doesn't matter whether you're Māori, Chinese, purple or whatever colour you are, have the opportunity to manage your species in your area, because you can't, obviously beat local passion. So this has been a hugely successful project. We've done the same with kiwi at Motu. There's Tui again, the star of every show, of course. And we've now sent our ideas to the United States. So we were asked to take Tui and other dogs over there to find petrels. I'd found they'd all been wiped out by mongoose, so I said to them, why don't you try this crazy idea we did in New Zealand and build a fence and put some speakers in and see what happens. Well, the seabird ecologists in Honolulu told me, no, you're dreaming, crazy kiwi, that won't work. We know more about it here than you do. So luckily, the company I work for said, oh, we'll give it a go. So we did that. We had decoys made by a company that works with Weta Workshop on the Hobbit. And of course, Americans love that. We had, oh my God, the Hobbit, So we got that made, and that just like hit headline news, the Hobbits come to Hawaii kind of thing. And all they were bird decoys, So they got paid a bucket load of money, and we got some serious mileage in New Zealand out of that. But I went to conferences and I presented, and I was told by everyone, these biologists, that this won't work in Hawaii. Well, last week, literally last week, we had our first petrels land inside our enclosures. So we've got Hawaiian petrels back on Maui, a critically endangered species. So yeah, it was a good result. Thank you. So as I mentioned earlier about local passion and being able to manage projects sustainably and at a local level, that's kind of the ethos behind the bioregions concept. Within our region, what we are doing is connecting 5 of the major conservation projects together. And so we're learning off each other. We've got skills in different areas. Some guys are really good trappers. Some girls are really great at growing trees. Other girls are brilliant trappers. So we all mix our skills up and working together. Because one of the things I see with conservation in New Zealand and the manage of our species is that we've lost that connection. Even when I talked to my grandmother, who was 95, she passed away last year, she had a real connection to the land. And if you are lucky enough to go to a pohiri on a marae, you'll see that connection firsthand. When you go onto the marae, you'll get what they call a wero, which is a challenge. Do you come in peace? So you'll be offered a stone or a piece of fern or a feather to take as a sign that you come in peace. You always send the woman in front of you, see, so they get picked on first, and all us guys hide at the back. It's great. And then the second thing is the karanga. So that's always gets my hackles up and I get a lump in my throat, but the kuia is standing in front of the marae and she's calling you on. She's not only calling to you, she's calling to the ancestors, her whānau that are buried in the hills. So there's that connection there with that land as well. And then the whai kōrero, so the kaumatua or the rangatira will stand up and he will get up and he'll stomp his tautra carved walking stick on the ground and clear his throat, probably 10 times. And the more he does it, it's going to be a really doozy speech. And so when you go through that process, you see that connection with the land. It's just pivotal, particularly to Māori, because they've had that history with the land in New Zealand, but also to Kiwis. I mean, our name Kiwi suggests a connection with the environment. So the aim of bioregions is to restore local people managing those taonga species like kiwi and titi at a local level. what we've got at the moment is we have a big information gap. So we've got old guys like me running around with grey highlights who are all going to fall over one day, and we have a lot of knowledge. But then we've got the little guys, the tamariki and the rangatahi, are the older kids, walking around, and they don't really have that knowledge. They're really the seedlings of our forest. So, but in the middle, we've got a whole lot of a big gap. There's no information there. And the same with our forests. If you walk into our forests, they look great when the camera is high definition cameras flying over the beech forest for the Hobbit, filming this beautiful beech forest of the South Island. But if you go underneath it, the stoats, the ferrets, the weasels, the ship rats, the Norway rats, the deer, the possums, the pigs, the list goes on and on, are having a huge impact on our forest environment. So we need to restore that knowledge gap. So local people in local areas like Wanaka and wherever you are actually need to know and be involved with managing their kiwi, their seabirds, their forests, and having a direct say in what happens. And what that does is it creates a really great standard of living. You can see these guys planting the lake edge this morning. That's improving Wanaka. It looks beautiful. Native plants growing everywhere. The willows don't look so good, but the natives are fantastic. And so you're increasing the ability also of business to export a really top quality New Zealand product, but even more importantly, a New Zealand story overseas. And what overseas people love is that organic New Zealand story. They want to know about where that wool came from that particular sheep to end up in Germany. They want to know about where the water came from to make that bottle of Chardonnay or whatever that ended up in the US. So by improving our environment, we improve our business opportunities, we get to employ more people, they get paid more. Mum doesn't have to go and work as a cleaner at $12 an hour till midnight. She can actually stay at home, read to her children, have a better family, dad's happier. It just improves our whole standard of living. We've got this huge opportunity to get away from fracking and digging coal, I believe, to actually looking at this long-term picture. And it's kind of a big ask for people because they can see this immediate dollar and share prices, and directors back in Singapore want that money, but we've really got to take a long-term approach to what we do here. So that's what we're about. We've got some amazing stuff going on in New Zealand, and restoring that connection with our local people is pivotal to us going forward, and increasing the value of brand New Zealand. So thank you, and that's all from me.